So I want to take a moment to formally welcome everyone here to Our Future, Our Voices First International Virtual Youth Summit. My name is Cierra Garrow, and I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying who's currently practicing and living in Kenora, Ontario, Canada. I work for Firefly, which is a multi-service, nonprofit organization that provides a wide range of mental health and child development services for children, youth, and families in communities all across Northwestern Ontario. I just want to take a moment and thank each and every one of you for being here and making time to attend this workshop among all the chaos and uncertainty in our lives right now. So I want to set the foundation for our talk today. I only have about 45 minutes to deliver to you a lot of knowledge. You might hear my dog bark, or you might need to attend to a child during this workshop. Please do what you need to do and know that this workshop will be recorded for you to review later. You are all the experts of your own life. Only you know your unique circumstances, lived experience, and context. I have many years of training, education, lived and clinical experience, which has given me a skill set to support you in your journey of self-discovery and personal growth. But I'm not an expert of your life. This is a partnership where we will work collaboratively towards solutions that fit your needs, context, and strengths. I can offer you all the solutions in the world, tell you what the research says, and tell you what has worked for me. But at the end of the day, it needs to be realistic and plausible for you. I'll provide you with a framework, support, and guidance, but you are the expert in this room. The tools I'll provide you today are not a magic fix-all. They're frameworks in which to begin tapping into your own strength, wisdom, intuition, and power within you. This will look different for each and every one of you. We're all doing the best we can right now, and comparison will erode our hearts and spirits. I also encourage you to please use the chat. There'll be multiple times during this workshop where I'll prompt you to put responses into the chat. The purpose of this is to utilize all of your wisdom and insight to strengthen everyone's collective knowledge. This is a safe place, and anyone who is disrespectful will be removed from the workshop. So I want to begin by discussing why this is important in regards to mental health in youth. The world of change makers has additional stressors. We have strict deadlines, tight budgets, and there's a lot of pressure on us that can cause us to become overwhelmed and paralyzed. This is a burden we should never bear alone. And it is the strength from our community and within us that will allow us to be resilient against whatever is thrown our way. Suicide is among the top 3 leading causes of death for people aged 15 to 44, both male and female worldwide. Young people aged 15 to 24 are more likely to experience a mental illness and/or substance use disorder than any other age group. 70% of mental health problems have their onset during childhood and adolescence. And based on Canadian currency, every $1 invested in mental health has a $4 return due to the savings from healthcare and economic burdens. So grief is a natural response humans experience when they face loss. Grief is often talked about when someone we care about passes away. But grief can be experienced during any form of loss. We're all experiencing grief as our employment, economic, education, and healthcare systems destabilize in front of us due to the pandemic. All of our emotions give us messages about our values, experiences, boundaries, and what's important to us. Grief is a signifier that encourages us to turn inwards and begin recalibrating and reconceptualizing our lives. The world isn't what it was before. And now we need to grow and adapt. Grief allows us to process our losses in a way our bodies and hearts need to. It is important we honor the process, as difficult as it is. What is particularly unique about the current grief is we're grieving a living loss. It's ambiguous. We don't have a closure point such as we do with a death. We don't know when we'll return to our jobs or be able to have dinner together with our friends and family. The feelings of loss just keep going and going and going. And this makes it more difficult for us to cope. The diathesis stress model is a psychological theory that attempts to explain the trajectory to sickness or disorder as a result of an interaction between a predisposition or vulnerability and the stress caused by life experiences. A diathesis can take the form of genetic, psychological, biological, or situational factors. Basically, it's our baseline disposition towards illness, stress, or being triggered. For example, someone who has a hereditary vulnerability to developing an anxiety disorder or has an anxious personality. So if we think of our life as the cup and the dark liquid as our diathis, we would then consider the foam to be our life circumstances. This might be a death in the family, failing a test, having to move, starting a new job, or any changes or events in your life that invoke stress. When this cup keeps getting fuller with all of our life circumstances, we risk it overflowing. When it overflows, this is when we develop sickness, disease, crisis, or an inability to cope. Our self-care helps empty our cup so it doesn't overflow. Self-care is preventative and protective factors to keep us mentally, physically, emotionally, and socially safe and stable. And our self-care helps us develop resiliency. Resiliency can be defined as the behavioral, emotional, mental, and physical ability to cope and face adversity, adapt to change, recover, and learn and grow from setbacks. This will be the foundation for our understandings of our toolkit. They're designed to be used as a preventative and protective factors to help us foster our inherent resiliencies and increase our ability to face adversity. A lot of the growth we experience as human beings happens either during or after a crisis. So I want you to take a moment and close your eyes or lower your gaze as I tell a story. I want you to imagine that there's a pot filled with cold water, and there's a frog who is quietly swimming in it. Now imagine that there's a fire that has been lit under the pot. The water begins to start warming up and soon becomes lukewarm. The frog finds this rather pleasant and keeps swimming. But the temperature keeps rising as the fire is burning longer. The water is now warm. It's a little more than what the frog enjoys, but it's now become a bit tired, but it doesn't begin to panic. The water is now really warm. The frog finds this unpleasant, but is also now weak. So left with no other choice, the frog stands the heat as it can do nothing. The temperature will thus keep rising up to the moment the frog will simply end up being cooked to death without ever extracting itself from the pot. You can now open your eyes if they're closed or return your gaze to the screen. If the frog was thrown into the pot halfway through the boiling temperature, the frog would have immediately given a powerful and single push with his legs to get itself out, therefore saving itself. When we think of self-care, we're often implementing it when we're already at the point of burnout, or in the case of the frog, boiled alive. Self-care is meant to be preventative, not reactive. If we're doing proper self-care, we can last in the boiling water longer than if we didn't. Self-care can also increase our self-awareness and act as an indicator when it's getting too hot in here, or even if there's a fire lit, giving us time, energy, and ability to get out of the pot. We often try to find ways to get rid of stress, but stress is a natural part of our life. Instead of trying to eliminate stress, we should focus on how to mitigate it and foster resiliency. Through our self-awareness, we can identify the indicators of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. We're also better able to foster resilience and recognize when our temperature or our stress is on the rise. Our bodies, cognitions, and emotions are messages to us to get our attention. It will signal to us when there are signs of heat or stress. This is unique for everyone, and this is why the key here is self-awareness of what you need for self-care and when you're reaching a point of being in boiling water. So I want you to consider, are you at risk of becoming a boiled frog? Do you know when to pause and take care of yourself? Are you aware of when to jump out of the pot before becoming cooked? Do you know what's happening to or within you? I encourage you to take these prompts away from this session and consider them, write them down, spend time with them. I'm curious, how many people feel like you might currently be at risk of becoming the boiled frog? So I'm seeing a lot of you have said yes to this poll. So this workshop is perfect for you. We're going to be addressing all the different ways that we can mitigate stress and support you in getting out of that pot before you're boiled alive. So we're going to jump into the toolkit creation. Now that you have some background on self-care and why it's so important for us as change makers and youth, we'll move into the activities for this skill building workshop. Please take a moment to grab something to write with or on. And if you don't have handouts printed or in front of you at the moment, our producer will be putting them in the chat as attachments as we work through the steps. If you download an attachment and cannot find your way back to the screen, simply just double-click on the Zoom icon in your taskbar. There might also be silence when I'm giving you time during the workshop to complete parts of this activity. I know this might feel uncomfortable, but please embrace this experience and use it as an opportunity to focus on the tasks. So this picture was taken on the Brazeau Loop Trail in Jasper National Park. This was my first true multi-day alpine backpacking trip. What you don't see in this photo is the countless tears, sobbing, swearing, blood, sweat, and bug bites that I endured to get here. I tore my meniscus on the second last day of the hike, with over 30 kilometers to go to get back to the trailhead. There's no cell service, there's no facilities nearby. It was just me, my partner, and the wilderness. So this is a really tangible situation that I can use as an example for how the solution-focused question works. So how did I overcome this moment? I knew that there was no other way out unless I got myself out. Who helped me? I prayed for strength from my belief system, and my partner encouraged me and took some of the weight from my bag to support me in being able to continue my journey. What got you through this moment? I said to myself over and over, just 2 more steps. Now 2 more, and then repeat. By breaking down the moments I had to endure helped me cope with each moment rather than continually thinking I had over 30 kilometers to get to the trailhead. What resources, gifts, skills did I access? I'm really stubborn. So in this moment, I was able to access my stubbornness. I also had a profound anger against the bugs that were biting me. I hate bugs. So this was able to motivate me to keep going. And just raw focus on each step, each breath, just focusing on each moment to get by. What strategies did I use? During the hike, I would stretch and roll out my muscles with a ball that I had brought in. I took painkillers to try and bring down the swelling and manage the pain, and took frequent breaks. Where did I draw on my strength, hope, and resilience from? My faith, my stubbornness, and the support of my partner. You'll have a handout in your package called the Solution Focus Question. Pull that out now. A copy will also be available in the chat as an attachment. Please take a moment to think of a time you overcame a challenge, struggle, adversity, problem, or conflict in your life. Once you have this moment in your mind, I want you to write down how you got through this problem using some of the question prompts. How did you overcome this moment? What got you through the moment? What strategies did you use? Who helped you? What resources, gifts, skills did you access? And where did you draw on your strength, hope, and resilience from? All of you have survived 100% of your hardest days. And the tools you need to persevere through these hardships and unprecedented times are already within you. I'll give you a couple minutes to write down some of the answers to these questions. Please feel free to share some of your responses in the chat. So I do see some people have began sharing some of their reflections in the chat. And 2 of the things that came up were talking about it as a skill of coping with challenges. And talking is an incredible skill to have because it takes a lot of bravery, vulnerability, and strength to do. And being able to talk about situations and share that with someone takes a lot of internal courage. Another person also brought up that reflecting on the problem and the possibilities to overcome a situation with a vision of a near and better future. Being able to look at a situation and kind of take into account, how you got through this and what strengths you have teaches you so much about yourself and your capacity to overcome and adapt the difficulties you face in your life. As I said previously, you've survived 100% of your hardest days, and you've managed that all on your own. And so those skills are already within you. So the next activity that we're going to be moving on to is called A Day in Your Life. You'll see you have 3 handouts for this. One is blank, one is filled in, and one has N's and D's in the check boxes. This is my brief example of what my day looks like typically. So to begin, I usually wake up and drink a glass of water. Then I turn on my phone, check my calendar. get up and go to the washroom, wash my face and begin my skincare routine, go to the kitchen and turn on my kettle, let out my dog and put food in his bowl, stretch while I'm waiting for the water to boil, let my dog in and make some tea. And then I make breakfast, which is usually yogurt, granola, and a protein. So now that you have an idea of what the beginning of my day looks like, I'd like you to take the next couple minutes to write out your day from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep. You can see my example here, and I've also provided an example in your handouts. When you're finished, please just indicate so in the chat. Don't feel you need to rush. You can complete this activity in full outside of this session. This activity is important because it serves several functions. It allows us to see where in our day we're already practicing self-care. It shows us where opportunities might be to practice self-care. And it identifies energy and time drains. When you're finished writing out either completing the activity or wrapping up the part that you were on, you'll see that my next handout that I have for you indicates an N and a D. So what this means is the N goes besides activities that are nourishing. So for me, waking up and having a glass of water nourishes me. It helps me feel more awake and more present. Whereas a D is for draining activities. When I turn on my phone and check my calendar, by looking at my to-do list and knowing all the things I have to accomplish in a day, fills me with a little bit of a feeling of dread. And so it takes away a bit of my energy. So I want to just give you another minute to review what you have written and just indicate in the little squares beside it whether or not it is a D or an N. So N for nourishing, D for draining. And I would love for you guys to share some of the nourishing activities if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat. Or if there's anything that surprised you. I've already seen that someone shared that there isn't actually that much self-care in their current schedule, which is important to know because it goes back to the self-awareness I was talking about earlier. For us to be able to make any type of change, especially sustainable change, we need to be able to be aware of what's going well and what isn't, and where we do have the opportunity to implement that change. So I do see that it's been shared going for a morning walk with my dog. Getting out, doing exercise, being outside, those are such key and critical pieces to being able to regulate our mood, being able to increase our energy. That's excellent. Another participant shared that getting ready like you're going to be going out, even when you're not, is really nourishing. 100%. We've had our routines disrupted from us. And so being able to have some degree of normalcy helps us be able to remain focused and kind of feel like we have some control. And I don't know about you guys, but definitely when I get dolled up, I have a huge confidence boost. I see some other people are sharing being able to cook and prepare food. Definitely. Awesome. Please continue to share as I move into the next activity. So you do have a handout in your package called the Self-Care Resiliency Toolkit. You'll see that one is blank and one is filled in with examples. You'll also see that both these documents are now available to you in the chat. When we look at building a toolkit to support us in being resilient in uncertain times, we can use what we just did the day in the life activity, and the solution-focused question to figure out what has worked for us in the past and what is working for us right now. Our bodies, minds, and hearts know how to take care of us. We now need to be intentional and notice what it is we're doing in times of stress that help us weather the storm. This goes back again to that importance of awareness. So I've created a toolkit framework that is divided into 5 categories: physical, mental, spiritual, social, and emotional. All 5 categories are interconnected. And if we're letting our self-care go in one area, every other area will also be affected. These are examples of what some people may consider doing for self-care in each section. You'll notice that the social section is virtually based. That is due to the current limitations of COVID and social distancing. But I want you to take a moment to look at your day in the life activity and look specifically at the lines you put an N or nourishing mark by. What categories do these nourishing activities fit into? Perhaps physical, mental, spiritual, social, emotional? Begin writing them into the following template if they do. I'll give you a couple minutes to do this. Please feel free to share in the chat what you're finding and indicate when you've completed this part of the activity. Please feel free to support your peers with placement of what activity you think some of the nourishing activities might go into. And they may potentially go into multiple categories. So I also want to give you guys an example of my own toolkit and what I do for self-care. You'll have a very similar example in your handouts. I encourage you to read the chat and also consider what else you may have done for self-care and resiliency from your solution-focused question, but also in general. Take a couple minutes to do this and fill this in the toolkit sheet. So I'm seeing some of the suggestions that have been put into the chat, and a lot of them do center around physical, and it also looks like mental. And so definitely physical is one of the more tangible types of, self-care, and knowing, eating well, getting the sleep we need, water, exercise, all of those pieces to keep our bodies safe and healthy. And so the other areas sometimes get shadowed when we're just focusing on one. And so I see someone has shared that with their roommates, they've been watching a series together, which is an amazing way to be able to connect with people. What other people have done too is being able to watch a series at a distance or cook a meal together over Zoom and being able to connect with that. People are also doing book exchanges, online book clubs. So I see a question from Liz asking if emotional and physical areas are the basis to the others. So how I'm interpreting that question is, do you mean those are foundations and the others kind of come up like a tree? Because how these 5 areas work is they are their own standalone kind of foundations. And each foundation does need the other to be able to be healthy, because our spiritual health will be connected to our mental and emotional and social and physical. Because if we're having a sense of fulfillment and purpose within our life, we're going to be feeling like we're having more energy to then do the physical activities. So every single area is interconnected in that way, and they're all kind of scaffolded on each other. But there's no hierarchy in one kind of sets the foundation and then builds up. It's more so lateral of they're all kind of creating this foundation. And if one area is kind of shaky and not built up, then the other areas aren't as strong as if it was also in the kind of the same area, like strength, if that makes sense. Does that help answer your question, Liz, if I interpreted it correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. And that's a really good question and really important to clarify too. Because when we consider self-care, sometimes we don't consider all 5 kind of realms or spheres. So I'll give you guys just 1 minute to finish up the activity, and then we're going to move on. We're unfortunately almost out of time for today. So I did want to just touch really quick, now that you have a foundation to work from to continue building your self-care resiliency toolkit. I encourage you to also consider what your warning signs are for when your temperature or stress is rising. You will see that you do have handouts in your package explaining burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma, and that will also be made available to you in the chat. So some of the common signs of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma are that feeling of loss of freedom and autonomy over your life, not having motivation or drive. You might feel exhausted and like you don't have energy or the ability to complete tasks. You might experience emotional disturbances such as numbness, anxiety, or panic. Changes might occur in your sleep, where you might have difficulty sleeping or sleep more than usual. You might develop or worsen depression symptoms, so the feelings of hopelessness and paralyzation. Post-traumatic stress symptoms may develop, which is connected to everything on this slide. We may become detached from others, feel lonely, irritable. We might be separated from our loved ones, which dismantles parts of our support system and increases worry. We might experience boredom, where we develop a lack of interest in hobbies, activities, and people, because our previous hobbies and interests and coping skills are no longer sustainable or possible. We may experience grief of losing people, control, and normalcy. And finally, we may display avoidant behaviors of not wanting to go outside, nervous of other people, wanting to hide or disappear, avoiding work, or our advocacy obligations. This is not an exhaustive list of all the symptoms people experience, and there are pronounced differences between burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. Again, there is a handout in your package for burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma, and the attachment should be available to you in the chat. I am curious though, how many of you find the symptoms that were just listed above to sound familiar to what you might be experiencing? So what I'm seeing is that most of you find that the symptoms I've listed are familiar, which makes really good sense considering the world that we're currently living in. So as we're wrapping up today, I wanted to provide you guys with some additional worksheets and printables that I've personally used before. These will be shared with you in a post-summit package for those who are interested. This workshop was very condensed, brief overview of some of the tools we can use to recognize, build awareness, and create a self-care resiliency toolkit. Each one of these activities could be a whole session within themselves. But I hope I've given you some new tools and a glimpse into how to use them to support yourselves in this uncertain time. I'm happy to answer questions or support people with their kits and activities. Please just feel free to email me, call me, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your time with me. Please stay safe and healthy. You will see that there is a post-session survey. If you could please fill that out and provide your honest feedback. It'll support me in being a better facilitator and support us in continuing to improve and grow with what this summit looks like.